Okay, so I shared with the leaders, my biggest fear is that I'm going to be up here bawling. And I probably will. And they're like, that's okay, everybody cries. But I ugly cry. And my face gets distorted and my throat gets tight and I can't get through it. So I'm hoping that I don't. I'm going to try to go slow. And I tried this several times, just telling my story. And I can't do it because I get on tangents. And so I have it all typed out. And I even tried reading this several times. And the first time, I cried through 95% of it. And then the second time was probably about 50%. And third time, I have family members that I was doing this to. I still have not gotten through this without crying. So maybe today's the day. So, good morning to everyone. This is kind of a big deal to be up here public speaking. When Raylene first asked me, I didn't answer her right away. It took me a little while. And the more I thought about it, though, the more I was convinced that I needed to step out and I needed to be brave. I'm starting already. This is not good. I'm going to go slow, take lots of drinks. Not a good start, sorry guys. But I feel God has given each of us a story, and God has given me one, and I told him back then that I would be faithful to share it. Back then, it was sharing it with one or two people, and that's more in my comfort zone, maybe over coffee. But if you know anything about God, he likes to push us out of our comfort zone, so that we have to rely on him. So, for the past several weeks, other ladies have gotten up here and shared what God's put on their heart. Jen talked about what it means to be kept by the Lord. Alexandra spoke about leaning on our own understanding and the perils of presuming. Gloria told us about expecting the unexpected and having a life of holy readiness. And Allie talked about God's Word, our personal love story from God. I'm going to approach this time in a little different manner. I'm not going to teach today on a certain topic or a passage. I don't know what to do with these. Just chuck them, because then maybe it'll be... I'm going to do it. I'm going to just share. And I'm going to just sit here and share my story like we were chatting over coffee. So, this is our coffee. You can take one.
She's so clever.
So you have to extend me a little bit of grace. I wrote this all down. I'm going to try to read it for both of our sakes, or get on long tangents. So, my story begins with my married life. I married Art right after college, and I had my whole life planned out, figured out. I was going to teach 1 or 2 years, and then I was going to start building my family. I wanted 3 or 4 kids. I was going to reevaluate after the 3rd to see if I really could handle the 4th. And I wanted to have kids when I was young and hip, which back then I considered myself to be. You laughed a little too much. Proverbs 16:9, the mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. So, during my 2nd year of teaching, we started trying for a family, and it didn't happen. So, I kept teaching. I wouldn't be considered infertile until after trying for a year. A year came and went. Sorry. I was enjoying my life. I was keeping busy with school, hobbies, family, church, but I really wanted my own family. Meanwhile, all 3 of my brothers and Art's 2 sisters started having babies, and questions were being raised about us. So we started going down the medical path, testing to see what was wrong and looking for answers. The first step, it was my family doctor, and he was the one who said that I was healthy and to give it a year before pursuing the next step. So that came and went. The second step, I got referred to an OB/GYN and went through all kinds of tests. There were no clear answers. Third step, we took it up a notch, and I took pills and went through insemination. This became very grueling because at the beginning, I would have to get checked by my OB and make sure everything was all right. And then I would have to take a pill that would help with ovulation, which the test earlier said I was ovulating, but we just did that. And then from day this to day that, I had to take an ovulation kit and the test every day. And then when it was positive that I was going to ovulate within the next 24 to 40 hours, I'd have to call my doctor and hope it wasn't on a weekend. And then I would go in for 2 days in a row to have the insemination process. And then about a week and a half after that, my cycle would start and it would all start again. I'd go in and get checked, take the pills, do the test, and after several cycles of this, it just got too much. So the fourth step was a break. At the beginning of the break, I was thinking that it would be maybe a month or two. I just needed a mental break from all of this. And this break turned into years and years. Now, this is going to be a little hard to admit. I had grown up in a Christian family, and I went to Christian schools from kindergarten through high school. And then I graduated from Biola University with my teaching degree and a Bible minor. And I read the Bible my entire life because it was required of me. But now, because of this situation that the Lord put me in, did I start to need Him in a way that I never did before. So I started reading the Bible. I asked my husband where I should start, and he suggested John. So I read John, Acts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and for the first time, God's Word became sweet to my soul. I would pray before I'd open the Bible that the Holy Spirit would open my ears and my mind to what God wanted me to hear. Now, this is also hard to admit. I am not a reader. I was a teacher, and I would read to my class, and I would fake it, but it's not something that I would do out of enjoyment at home. I would not read. So this was the first step. It was a big step for me. Then I started reading my Bible and actually looking forward to doing that. And then, through different circumstances, I felt God was asking me to take another step. And another little tangent, my husband and I, we would tithe to different places. And so like when we would tithe, let's say to like Billy Graham, when we filled out our check, there would be a little slip and you could put an X in a box and they send you a book, like a devotional or whatever. So I always checked that box. And I would get my mail and I would get the book and I would open it up and I would put it on my shelf. Because, you know, I'm a non-reader. And my library looked really amazing. There were all these awesome books, but I hadn't read any of them. So now we're at this next step, and I get my mail, and there's a book in there, and I open it up, but instead of putting it on the shelf, it caught my attention, and I actually read it. And it was this book, Let Prayer Change Your Life. So I had gone now, the first step of reading my Bible and it really becoming sweet. And now the next step was to have this prayer routine. So I read this Bible and I read this book and I was very, very inspired by it. And I then started doing a sweet prayer time every day. And I would sit at my kitchen table, physically pull out a chair for Jesus, and I would go through my prayer routine. So, kind of tell I'm a teacher, huh? We're going to pass this out because I thought it might be helpful for you to have my prayer routine. So, most of this was was adopted from the book, and then I kind of made it my own. So the first thing I would do is I would sit down on my table, my kitchen table, and I would have my journal that I was going to write it all in. And it starts with my part, P-A-R-T. And so the first thing is praise. And what I would do is I would read one psalm, and I would either rewrite the psalm on my paper, or if certain things, stuck out to me, I would write those down. That's the P part. A is admit. And I would start this, I would put my A down on my paper, and I would write out Psalm 139, 23, and 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Just by writing that down, I felt like it was just opening me up to be honest with God. So I would write down just the things from that day that I had to admit that I failed at, and I would write that down. Then the R is the requests, and I would write names, short explanations of all of the things that I was praying for. When a friend says, hey, will you pray about this? Will you pray about that? That's where I would go. And then the T is Thanksgiving, and I would just write down big things, little things. Sometimes it was just, I was thankful for the breeze coming through the window. Just anything. Then the next section, this is where I changed it. It's really good, but it was LMNOP. So the first is part, and then it's LMNOP. And L is listen, and I'll talk about that in a minute. M is messages, and then New Testament, Old Testament, and then the end is a proverb. I ended up not doing the M and O, and I just did the L, listen, and the P, proverb. And at proverb, it's very self-explanatory. I would just read through one proverb a day and jot down things that would jump out at me. But the L, this was the most foreign to me, the listen time. And it's a time to just sit quiet before the Lord and listen to what He's saying to you. And so the very first time I'm doing this, I put my L, on the paper, and went like this. And then all of a sudden, things really started popping in my head. The things that were popping in my head was like, oh man, I gotta change my laundry load. Oh, look at all that dust. Oh, there's a spider up there. This all was going in my head. So then I had to get a separate sheet of paper. So I have my journal, and I have a separate sheet of paper. And so whenever these things would pop in my head, I'd just write them down. Change the load of laundry, dust the whatever, go through that. And because then it was out of my brain, and I didn't have to keep revisiting it. So I ended up, when I was done with my prayer time, I had my little list of things I had to do, but it was very helpful. So I was starting to write all those things down, and then I'm just waiting for God to talk to me. And I got nothing. So I moved on to my proverb, and I did this the next day. And I get down to the L part, and I put L, and I have my list now next to me. And I'm just quiet again. I waited probably a minute and a half. And when you're just sitting there, that is a long time. Nothing. So, moved on to my proverb, got to the next day, and I put down my L, and I said, no, Denise, you gotta give it more than a minute and a half. So I actually set a timer for 5 minutes. So I'm sitting there, my mind is all open, turn it to 5 minutes, and I just wait. And after 3.5 minutes, there was nothing for 3.5 minutes, and then a lyric from a praise song came into my head. I was like, oh, so I wrote that down. Well, every day that I did my listen time, I don't know if I just got more in tune or if it was so sweet. God would share things, and I would, if it was a phrase, I would maybe look it up in the Bible and see what it said on that. If it was a passage, sometimes it would be like, Exodus 12:7, and I'm thinking, is there an Exodus 12:7? But I would open it up and I would look, and read it and I would put it down. So this was foreign to me, but it was so awesome. And it was really amazing. So my little tangent, now I'm back to my infertility issues. So during these years, I never stopped trying for a child. I had such an ache in my heart. It was physical. I could feel this ache. It was something I couldn't just ignore, but I brought it out to the Lord. And at the beginning, when I thought I could control my life, this was very frustrating because I couldn't control that. I couldn't get pregnant, and it was something I couldn't do anything about. And my oldest brother and his wife had 9 children. It's not blended, it's theirs, plus some miscarriages in between there. But every time Dawn would get pregnant, they would, do the calls. And, maybe after the first 4, I know she dreaded calling me. Because it was just a reminder I didn't have any. My second brother had 5 kids. And my youngest brother had 3. But all my family was in Michigan, so it wasn't in my face every day. And I was truly happy for them, but it's just a reminder, So Art's got 2 sisters, and his, they're both younger, but his older one had 3 kids. No, I mean, sorry, 2. And his younger one had 3. And it's something like they're younger than us, and now they're passing us up, And they lived in town, and I was very involved with those. Those were my babies, because I had my class, but those, I babysat all the time and all of that. But it was just a reminder. It's in my face every day. And through all my journaling and my devotions, getting close to the Lord, I started getting a little more content with my situation. I was feeling pretty good about it. And in fact, I was at a different church, but I had just gone to the after-school service one night, Sunday evening, and it was such a sweet time, and I was just on a super high. And I got in the car, called my husband that I was driving home, and he informed me that his younger sister was pregnant with her 3rd. And bam, my spiritual high, I'm feeling better about things, it hit the ground, and I cried the whole way home because I was just talking with Kathy several months earlier, and they said that they were done. They weren't going to try to have any more children. They were happy with their 2, and now she's pregnant again. So I was crying the whole way home, wallowing in self-pity, and I had been in that place so often before. I thought I had gotten past it, but I didn't. I was right back there. And I remember at the beginning of our infertility time, the hardest day ever was Mother's Day in church. The pastor would have all the mothers stand and try not to get... And I would sit there burning in that chair. My face was red because I wanted to be standing. And it was all about me. Me. There was several years I couldn't even go to church on Mother's Day. It was just too painful. But on this spiritual high day that I was having, I crashed right back down to all of those feelings, which I thought I had gotten past. In fact, I had heard that Madonna was pregnant. I had some words with the Lord that day. I said, God, I would be a better mother than Madonna. And Kathy, she didn't even want another child. Anyway, it was all about me and me and me and me. So, my husband and I, we went through this together. And when it wasn't happening after several years, we brought up adoption. And we had decided that whatever we went through, we had to be on the same page. And so at the beginning, I was like, hey, this isn't happening, let's go through adoption. And he wasn't quite on that page, had some issues with the process and all the other stuff. And then he came to me later and said, hey, what about if we adopt a little Down syndrome baby? And I wasn't quite on page with that. I was teaching at the time, and one of the girls in my class had a little sister that had Down, so I thought, well, I got to be open to this. Maybe this is what the Lord wants us to do. So I had that mother talk with me about it, and she brought up things we hadn't even thought about, that they have a lot of physical issues, and that their little girl had like, I don't know, 9 or 10 surgeries already. And so I went home, and anyway, that mom was so sweet. She prayed with me. She just, it was so wonderful. But I went home and told my husband, and that scared him. He didn't know if his heart could take, having this child go through all these surgeries. And anyway, regardless of that, we just never were on the same page at the same time with that. So we would put little timelines. Okay, well, if you're 30, maybe we'll adopt. No, 35. Kind of kept getting farther out. And it came and went. So I'm reading my word, I'm doing my prayer journal, and God started working on my heart. In my request entry from the beginning, it was always, I would write, let me have children. Let me have children. And I wrote this month after month. That was my request. And then it kind of morphed a little bit into and I was saying, Art would be such a good father. I just want to see what he would be like as a father. Then it was, I just want to know what it feels like to be pregnant. And it kind of kept changing. And it finally, one day, I wrote, God, if you're not going to give me a child, take this ache away, because I can't take it. And that was a big deal for me to pray that. And I don't know, a couple months after that, I'm doing my journal, and I remember getting to that section, and I thought, wow, I don't have that ache anymore. And it scared me because I thought that was his answer. No children, I'm going to take the ache away. But I was relieved and I was scared at the same time. So at this point, I hit the acceptance stage. And I finally got to the point where I surrendered all those hopes, dreams, and I said, God, I can actually picture my life without kids, and I'm okay with it, which is huge. Now, I was super busy at the time. I was teaching, I was coaching. I was a consultant for Creative Memories. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah. So it has to deal with photo albums. And so I would have workshops at my house, and all the gals would come and work on their albums. I would teach classes on how to do their albums, and I even had retreats up in the mountains, and it would be like 2 nights and 3 days, and it was so fun because I would get all the food, I would prepare the food, and they would just work on their albums and visit and chat, and it was a blast. So when you get a bunch of mothers working on albums, a common topic that would come up would be their babies and their birth stories. And they even kind of one-up each other, like, oh, well, you did this, well, I did this. But anyway, it was fun, but it was also a little bit sad knowing I was never going to have a birth story to share or to embellish or. So even though I accepted the situation in my life, I never quit wanting a child. It just didn't rule my entire world. And my cycles, it's a little bit personal here, but they were never like clockwork. Some months they would be like 25 days and some would be 36 days. So at the beginning, whenever I had a longer cycle, I had a false hope that I was pregnant. And so I took so many pregnancy tests. You can buy them at the dollar store, right? So I had them just stocked everywhere because I'd be, I'm on day 3. I must be pregnant. And I would take the test, and it was always negative. So I got really good at taking my temperature. And I would do this every day, and I would know my cycle. I finally got to figure it out. And it was very, very freeing because I could tell to the day when I would start my cycle. So I didn't have to go through that up and down cycle. And I was at a good place emotionally. I'm trying to think. We might have got out of order here. No, I'm on. So anyway, I was at a pretty good place because I wasn't having that, the false hope that I was getting pregnant. I was feeling good about my situation. I was busy with everything. And at that point, God started speaking to me during my listening time, during my reading. And some of it kind of freaked me out because I just didn't want to be raw again. I didn't want to have a false hope. And that's what he was giving me. He was giving me words and passages that were kind of rocking my world. We're now in about year 12 of our marriage. One of the listen times was it was 2 Kings 4:16. And again, I'm like, 2 Kings 4:16. So I open it up. And it says, about this time next year, Elisha said, you will hold a son in your arms. When I read that, I was like, oh no. I mean, I was excited, but it's like, really? Did you really need me to read this, And so soon after that, it was like maybe a week after, I was at a women's, our small group, we're having a koinonia at night at one of the houses, and we were all going around and we were giving our testimonies. And of course, mine ended with, and I'm okay with not having children. That's how mine ended. And I was at a good spot then. The very next week, this lady that was in my group came up to me. She grabs me by the arm, pulls me to the parking lot, and she's like, Denise, God woke me up last night because I have a message for you. And I'm like, you're kind of freaking me out now. And she says, Denise, hope. There is hope. And I said, I don't know what that means. But I didn't want to be raw again. So I just almost didn't want to hear it. But he was doing all these things at this certain time that was preparing me. So fast forward a couple of months, and needless to say, that year thing, a year later, I wasn't pregnant. I thought, oh, I'm going to have a son in a year. And then I counted out 3 months later because I thought, oh, maybe that just means I'm going to be pregnant then. And it did. It came and went. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. Then Lene comes up to me and says this to me in a Bible study. And now, a couple months after that, I'm taking my temperature like I have for years and years and years. And when you ovulate, this is going to be too much information, but your temperature's like this. When you ovulate, it's heat-inducing, and so your temperature goes up after ovulation. So once my temperature would rise, I would have 11 high, and then I would start. So take my temperature. It was day 12 high, and then 13, and then 14, and then 15. I'm at 17 high, and I'm like, honey, what do we do? Because I didn't. Anyway, we decided that I would get a pregnancy test because I don't have any anymore because I was all past that. And so I'm driving home from school teaching. I decide to go through the store. I get another pregnancy test, which I hadn't taken one in years. And we decide we're going to take it in the morning. Because if you're doing this, you have to play all the games. Your strongest pee is in the morning. So then, it's true. So I was going to take it in the morning. Well, that night, I woke up at 3 o'clock. And I had to pee so bad. So I wake him up. I'm like, honey, I have to pee right now. It's in my mind, if I pee then, and then I pee in the morning, it's not strong enough to show up, right? So we said, okay, we'll just do it now. So I took that pregnancy test, and it was positive. This was 2 days before my husband's birthday. And the song, I don't know, it was just the song on the radio, but it was just such a It's "Oh, Praise Him." That's our theme song. We have a theme song for everything. So, "Oh, Praise Him." So, I think it was like the next day, I made a lemon meringue pie. We invited his mom and dad and sisters over because we were going to tell them. And it was kind of funny because both my mom, of course I'm on the phone with my mom, and his mom, they didn't believe us. And it wasn't like they didn't believe us, they were just worried that this was another false thing, But his sister just hugged me and held on to me. And it was so sweet because she knew right away this was it. So after, I got my test confirmed by the doctor, our parents were on board. And it was kind of funny because everybody took claims to this pregnancy because they had been praying for so many years. Like, I think maybe some of them gave up praying, but everybody took claim. Our church, our friends, our family, our coworkers, everyone. And from there, it was kind of a whirlwind. We were sure we were going to have a boy because every barren mother in the Bible had a boy. So when we found out we were having a girl. We were like, wow. We were just so thrilled. It didn't matter. But she was born the day after my 37th birthday. So my first pregnancy, I don't like this word, but it was considered geriatric. Geriatric pregnancy. And everything was healthy. Our miracle girl was healthy. She was born at the end of August, and so I changed jobs. And I retired from being an elementary teacher, and I got hired for my dream job of being a mother. Before she was 1, I was pregnant with my son. Before he was 1, I was pregnant with Miranda. When Miranda was born, I was 40. And I had a newborn, a 1.5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And when she turned 1, I kind of was like, no, I have my hands full. I don't know if I can handle any more. So Miranda turned 2 and 3 and 4. And so we figured God did a miracle, opened my womb, spit out 3 kids, and now I'm infertile again. And I thought, that is just awesome. So we got rid of all of our baby gear. And we cleared it all out. I dropped my maternity insurance, and a month or so after that, I was pregnant again. And I was 44 when Amber was born. A lot of people gave us advice along the way. I'm kind of warning you to not do this. During our infertility times, we heard that I needed hormone cream. I needed to go on vacation. I needed to try this special seaweed that would help us conceive. I needed to get acupuncture. It'll just happen when you stop trying. I could go on. There were some that, when I read this, my husband's like, you better not say that. So I'm not saying the one I'm not supposed to say. After kids, people would say, see, it happened when you stopped trying. We never stopped trying. Then they would say, what did you do different? We didn't do anything different. Like, I can tell you, I didn't even change my body lotion. There was nothing different. And then this was Pastor, I don't know if it was Pastor Ed or Greg, had this, and this verse just stood out at me. It's a different context, but you can see where it fits into mine. It's Acts 3:12. Men of Israel, why do you marvel at this? Why do you look so intently at us, as though by our own power or godliness this happened? God, through Jesus, made this happen. So, James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from above. I mentioned now that I had my dream job of being a mother. I also need to mention this is the hardest job ever. I often say that I was the best mother until I had children. The words, I would never, and I can't believe that they let their child do. I've eaten all those words within the last 18 years. And remember me telling you about my creative memory workshops and the retreats and how I was sad that I did not have a birth story? Well, God must have been up there snickering while I was crying over this. And I could just hear him saying, just wait, my dear, just wait. So I ended up having 4 miracle babies. Each birth was totally different. One, I had an epidural. One, I had half the epidural because it fell out halfway through, which they didn't know until after. The 3rd child, I had all natural. And my last baby was taken via an emergency C-section, which I got a staph infection. I had to have another surgery, got to stay in the hospital for 14 more days. Art was my nurse, and he had to change my IV antibiotics. I had a wound vac, and I found out that cellulitis wasn't on the back of my legs. Do you know what cellulitis is? When they said, oh, she has cellulitis, I was like, oh, how dare you? But it's like an infection below the skin or something. So I had that too. So some days, weeks, and months were very rough. But here we are with 4 healthy kids. I have this frame up on next to all my kids' pictures, and it says 1 Samuel 1:27, for this child I prayed, and the Lord has given me my petition. I'm almost done. I thought I could not cry through the end here. My husband and I have been blessed beyond what we could imagine. Sometimes even now, when we're driving somewhere, we look back in the car and see our poor kids, and we can't believe it. One of our common sayings is that the days are long, but the years are short. Allison just graduated from high school, and Amber, my youngest, graduated from elementary. She's going into 6th grade this year. And I'm not the young hip mom that I thought I wanted to be. I'm the mom at school, functions, field trips that looks like the grandma instead of the mom. But this is exactly how God wanted it to be. He wanted me to grow closer to him, to shed my control, to lower my pride, to appreciate his gifts and not feel entitled or deserving, because I'm not. So, over the years, I've come to realize that each person has a story. And one person's story isn't better than the other's, it's just different. This is a portion of my story, and I wanted to be bold enough to share it because God did a miracle in me and Art's life, and I want God to get the glory. I also wanted to encourage anybody that might be in a similar situation than me. So, with that, thanks for listening, and I want to end with, to God be the glory.